everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to extend a special thanks and shout out to Elizabeth and Robert for hosting us. I don't know how familiar people are with Impact Earth, but they have been in the composting business and just the zero waste, initiative for, gosh, how long? 12 years. 12 years, yeah. And we do our composting through them. They have household pickup, or you can bring your bin by. The household pickup has like a monthly service charge, and if you bring your bin by, it's just, as you use the service. And they compost everything, and then this time of year, you can usually get some compost if you like, or if you're like me who doesn't really deal with compost, you don't have to get it. So that's why I like to bring mine here, so I know that it's being used to good effect. Because I'm not the best gardener, but so I am running for my third term on the town board. I was first elected in 2017, started serving in January of 2018, and so technically I'm the longest serving and most experienced candidate in the race right now. We have 3 people running for 2 open seats on the town board. And so today I kind of wanted to focus our discussion on what we're doing on the town level for our sustainable future in Brighton. One of the things I do is serve as the liaison to the Sustainability Oversight Committee. And the Sustainability Oversight Committee has been, in one form or another, in effect for 22 years in Brighton. It started out on a grassroots basis, like a lot of our committees do.
What does the Sustainability Oversight Committee do, Robin?
Well, the Sustainability Oversight Committee advises the town board on all things environmental and sustainable, as you might suspect. So, most of our policies that we've implemented, they have come from the suggestions of the Sustainability Oversight Committee. In addition to that, they helped author with a consultant the Climate Action Plan, which we'll talk a little bit about today. The town does have a climate action plan. It is available on the website for you to access. But one of the things that I want to do in my third term is implement more of the initiatives that we have within the climate action plan. As a member of or as a liaison to the Sustainability Oversight Committee, because technically the liaisons are only town board members and they do not actually sit on the committees to which they liaise, we have been able to implement a number of sustainable projects at the town level. We have our first net zero building as a result of some New York State Energy Research Development Agency grants that we obtained through the Sustainability Oversight Committee's efforts. So the lodge at Brighton Town Park, the Carmen Clark Lodge, that was our first building that was converted from oil. Yeah, we had a very old oil system, which of course does not cool in the summer. We converted that to an air source heat pump system with a small solar array, and now that is almost, it's about 95%.
And what is that place? And what is
so it's a lodge. The lodges are just where you can get together for it. They're in the parks. You can do parties and picnics. You have
to reserve them way ahead.
Right. Yeah, you have to reserve them. Like for a weekend, you have to reserve them way ahead. But weekdays, they are more available.
And where is it?
On Westfall, there's 2 of them, right?
Yeah, Brighton Town Park on Westfall. Yeah, and so with that project, we were actually able to apply for an additional $175,000 or $100,000 worth of grants, which then we plan to convert 4 more buildings. There's the Buckland Park Lodge, the Meridian Center Lodge, the Brighton Town Hall Pool Building, and the concessions building in Buckland. So those, and the nice thing is all of those facilities needed new roofs. So this was we were able to upgrade the infrastructure, again, new roof, and also implement sustainable features on all of those buildings. So they're all going to get air source heat pumps and or geothermal systems and solar panels. So they'll all be net zero buildings as well. So that's super exciting. And doing those buildings then made us eligible for another $175,000 worth of grants from New York State Energy and Research Development Agency. I'm going to call them NYSERDA from now on. And those funds will go towards sustainable features over in the town hall renovation project. And so that's the next sustainable project that I kind of want to review with here. So the town hall has been in existence for 71 years, and the HVAC system was that old. So during COVID, what we discovered was there was basically no air transfer, and so it was not safe to be in town hall. That's why we had our town board meetings remote for so long, because we did not have the air filtration within the building. So as we look to upgrade that, we were able to obtain some ARPA funding in order to upgrade that, because that was all money that was available on the federal level to upgrade, to do projects related to COVID.
What is ARPA stand for?
The American Recovery Plan Act.
Oh, okay.
Yes, not the other ARPA. American Recovery Plan Act. So this was all funding that was available to get us out of the COVID economic downturn. And so through that, we were able to obtain enough funding to really address our HVAC system. And as we looked at that system, here's where the Sustainability Oversight Committee came in, because we were just going to implement another regular gas-fired HVAC system, do the traditional thing, and the Sustainability Oversight Committee at that point wrote a letter, and they said, hey, since this system lasted 70 years, shouldn't we build a system for the next 70 years? And thankfully, that's what we ended up doing. We ended up scoping a geothermal system. We're in the process right now of drilling 24 500-foot wells. When we did the test drill, we found out that basically the site is ideal for a geothermal. So we're going to be able to generate a lot of great energy, and hopefully we'll be able to implement some solar on the roof there. We're still kind of teasing out where the best areas are, but again, because we were able to do this sustainably, we can apply the NYSERDA grant money, and we are also eligible for Inflation Reduction Act funds. So we're hoping that those funds remain available. There's no clawback from the federal government. I was just in Washington, D.C. with elected officials to Protect America, which is a national group of environmentally minded elected officials to lobby our current representatives to make sure that they were ensuring that funding remained available to our municipalities. because that funding, the Inflation Reduction Act funding did go out to municipalities, tribal groups, philanthropic agencies. So it's essential that we're able to retain those funds in order to keep on track. So the NYSERDA funds are important because New York State passed the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Protection Act. So that set goals for reductions in emissions, carbon emissions by a certain date. And in order to reach those goals, we need to do a lot of conversion, and I think it's important that we do that on the municipal level in order to demonstrate leadership, just like the CLCPA said, for our communities. So those are the projects that we have in sight in terms of the facilities. And then we also have, okay, I'm gonna check my notes, just one of my other topics here.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah,
the
sure.
Sustainability Committee? Two questions. One is, how are people appointed to it? Who's on it?
Oh,
And,
I love that you're interested because we,
and where do they meet, and can people
Yeah.
attend those meetings?
yes, they technically, I don't think technically they are public meetings, but they are held in the public, and we do have outsiders visit, and those are held once a month. The volunteer hours are not limited to just that. Like I said, they do letters, they worked on the climate action plan, but we are looking to expand membership within the Sustainability Oversight Committee now. If you go to the town's website and, Town of Brighton / Sustainability Oversight Committee, or SOC, if you search it, you'll be able to find where you can apply for membership on the Sustainability Oversight Committee. And yes, you're technically appointed, but really if you're expressing an interest and we have availability of positions, it's a pretty smooth process where you go through an interview by the person who staffs the town hall staffer to the committee, which is Brendan Ryan, and the co-chairs of the committee, and then members of the town board like myself, and we just sit down with you and get an idea of how you can contribute. And we do like to have people from different expertise areas on the committee. So Jonathan, what is yours?
He should be on the committee.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. So again, we're looking for members now, and we would definitely love to have your feedback. Right now, the Sustainability Oversight Committee is looking at the town hall renovation project from the standpoint of parking. There have been requests by some, particularly town staff, to increase the parking on the campus, and so they've been doing some benchmarking with the assistance of Brendan Ryan to see how utilized is the parking. Is it really necessary to expand our footprint in parking at town hall? And it's those types of questions that the Sustainability Oversight Committee asks, just like they ask, do we really want an HVAC system, or do we want the cooling and heating system for the next 70 years at Town Hall? So Essential Board, they just submitted a letter to the town board of their accomplishments over the last year. They do it on an annual basis, and they also this is really interesting. They do a review of the capital improvement plan, which is a 3-year plan for all the larger capital expenditures that occur at the town level, and they make sure that we are adhering to our values with regard to sustainability as we invest in infrastructure. So like when we buy those vehicles, like are we looking at all of our options in terms of the fuel emissions and whatnot, and so we are.
Are we using EVs?
We do some EVs. They made the recommendation years ago that the police vehicles should at least be hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
And now I see police forces are actually converting to electric vehicles. Well, you know what? They're fun to drive and they have great pickup. So I think police are slowly migrating towards the notion that EVs might be the wave of the future. But right now we have hybrid vehicles for our police department, and we've received our first couple of EV town vehicles. Yes.
So are you the only town board member on
That liaises with the group? Yes. Yeah.
So it would be safe to say that you've been a driving force for what you've been talking about?
Yeah. And again, when we look at, it's really my role to, as they come up with ideas and whatnot, to help them move along the process to get those ideas implemented on the town level. So, I know the ins and outs of the process and where, what committees to present to and whatnot. So
was it pretty smooth sailing for all these things, or was there resistance along the way?
There is resistance, especially, with the, when we looked at whether we were going to do an HVAC system, because in the near term, HVAC systems look like they're a lot less expensive. It's
Right.
when you look at over time, operation costs, and those are the things that the Sustainability Oversight Committee can help codify for the town and say, hey, it might seem like it's a bargain now to install a gas system, but what's it gonna look like 20 years from now? What's it gonna look like 40 years from now? Because we did have a discussion whether we would do an air source heat pump potentially, and again, what that system would look like in terms of recouping energy costs, and ultimately, because of the the proprietary nature of some of the air source heat pump systems and the maintainability and how long that would last, as opposed to a ground source heat pump system, we opted for the ground source heat pump system, which I think again is a system for the next 70 years. And in addition to that, one of the things that made the air source heat pump system more economical was that the town board a few years back authorized the Public Works Department to basically limit the depth of wells within the town. And I thought this was rather arbitrary and not necessarily forward leading, because we were hitting pockets of methane, and then gas would be released, people would smell it and then get concerned, call in, but to me, you could hit a pocket anywhere, like 0 to 500 feet. So, and we weren't drilling to 500 feet like the town did, but we were drilling to 250, and so the town kind of limited it to 150, which again I felt was sort of arbitrary. So when it came to looking at our system, I was like, why are we holding ourselves to this arbitrary standard? And the Sustainability Oversight Committee agreed. They're like, this will make it far more economic because, you know, that's a lot fewer wells. You know, if you think we're drilling 24 500 wells, think of how much it would have cost to drill, like, you know, 3 times that in terms of the 150-foot wells. So again, so the Sustainability Oversight Committee, they kind of advise on all of that. And again, they're advisory boards, so they don't set any policy, but they do make recommendations to the town board. Like, they'll be writing a letter when it comes to, you know, the parking at town hall.
Are their findings public?
Yes.
Where would we see what
So all of their minutes and agenda are on the town website. And I do know that they're all caught up because we've been making sure that we stay on top of that. And in particular though, I think that annual report that we did this year actually covered a couple years back, just because there was some transition in staff and whatnot. So, and just with the focus on the climate action plan and COVID, I think we had a few years to catch up. So, it's a very interesting read. The most interesting read is probably the suggestions for the next year. So, and again, it's expanding the number of EVs we have, make sure that we limit parking, make sure that as we develop in the town, we develop sustainably, in particular, looking at, aligning with the Monroe Avenue road diet that is going to occur in, unfortunately, not as soon as we would have liked, but it's going to occur within the next 5 years.
Complete streets kind of thing? A complete streets?
Oh, so the road diet, right now, Monroe Avenue is 4-lane road, right? And 2 travel lanes in each direction. And what we found is that roads with this volume of traffic in particular, this configuration really creates lane confusion, right? So you have people like switching between the 2 lanes, and it actually slows down traffic. It's less efficient. So, and it's less safe ultimately. So as they look at repaving this road, they're going to maintain the same right of way, and they did this on East Avenue, if you recall, like, what was it, like 6 years ago? 6 years ago. When they did the East Avenue road diet, East Avenue was configured very similarly. The 2 lanes
Right.
In either direction, and they made that one travel lane in each direction, and then a 2-way center turn lane. And the flow of the traffic improved. The traffic calming was increased.
And there's room
So-
for a bike lane?
There
Because I
was,
used to ride my bike on East Avenue. It was
Yeah.
like taking your life in your hands. When it
you
was,
know, that was actually my first foray into local politics. I am the proud founder of Citizens for East Avenue Bike Lanes. When the New York State DOT presented their plan to the community with regard to East Avenue road diet, it's a 40-foot right-of-way. So if you have 3 lanes that are each 10 feet in width, you have room for 2 5-foot bike lanes. And so at the time, it was Joe Robach, who was our state representative and chair of the department, or chair of transportation for the legislature, for the Senate. And he was not as inclined to implementing the 5-foot bike lanes, which, then are federally compliant, and you could mark them as real bike lanes. So we got 4.5 feet on each side, and then it was interesting. The New York State DOT just had an arbitrary standard in that said that on roads of that traffic volume, a two-way center turn lane had to be 11 feet. So that's what that's the requirement that we just couldn't get over, and we suggested that maybe they pilot this road to see if a two-way center turn lane, because when you think about it, this two-way center turn lane it's got the least traffic at any time, and it's got the slowest moving traffic. But they were very insistent that larger vehicles, trucks or whatnot, really needed that extra width for
And bike lanes have to
maneuverability.
be 5 feet?
Federally compliant to be labeled as a bike lane.
I
Yes.
see.
Yeah, but I think we have another bite at that apple because they kind of call them bike lanes. They don't call them, and so you eventually you have to bring them into compliance if you're using them for all intents and purposes as bike lanes. So the longer that it is out of compliance, the better case we have that maybe they can be converted to actual bike lanes, because at this point it is literally just paint on the roads. Literally just paint. It's not
And it's more safe.
yes, far more safe for
yeah.
cyclists. Far more safe. So so we lost that battle, but it's always kind of been on my mind, and it's one of the reasons why, again, the Sustainability Oversight Committee advocated for complete streets. So the town did just pass an official complete streets policy. It is not as strong as we would like. It was authored by the town attorney, who tends to have a little, be very liability conscious and doesn't want the town to be forced into creating complete streets without, the budget allocated for them. But it's a starting point.
Right.
It's a starting point. And again, I'm hoping to strengthen that complete streets policy as in future terms. So
What might, I only have a vague idea of complete streets. What might it look like and where?
okay, so complete streets are basically some streets that don't just accommodate vehicle traffic. They also accommodate pedestrians and cyclists, and they have sidewalks and bike lanes and crosswalks intermittently. So that's more of a complete street model, right? Not just solely car focused, but also incorporating all forms of transportation.
And that would be all down Monroe?
Monroe, again, we are hoping for a bike lane on Monroe. So we are in the extremely early stages of planning, but they did, the New York State DOT did send a very preliminary plan to the town, but they will be holding, when we get closer to actually digging. Hey! Sorry, welcome, Julie. When we get closer to actually, digging, implementing the project, further along in the design phase, and then they'll be holding some public forums, just like they did with East Avenue.
Nice.
Yeah.
Robin, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sort of as a follow-up to this.
Yeah.
So we've heard that, the DOT hasn't provided a lot of details about the construction for the bridge this direction to
Right.
Highland and the resurfacing that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
As well as the bridge to the Village of Pittsburgh. So some very sketchy details
Yeah.
so far. What we've heard is that it's gonna take 5 years or something to that nature, and they'll do it in sections.
Yes, they'll do it in sections. It will take them around 5 years, but we've seen the bridges. This is a Bridge New York project, and we've seen the bridges. They are deteriorating. It's been a while. I think if anybody really takes time to look at those bridges, they're a little scary.
Yeah, no, I'm fully
Yeah,
supportive.
yeah,
I'm fully
yeah.
supportive of
Yeah,
the
but
project.
again, this is where the town weighs in, and it's important that as they come up with a plan, we were pretty upset, especially with this, the Sustainability Oversight Committee. They started removing trees in preparation, in early stage preparation, and I said, you shouldn't even remove a single tree without getting community feedback on this. So we have been in touch with the New York State DOT, and they are planning a series of community forums with regard to the bridge projects, and so look out for the
What bridge, where are the bridges?
the expressway bridges.
Oh,
And
So why did they, like, where 590 goes over Allen's Creek
Yeah,
Road, they
yeah.
just wiped out all the trees?
yeah,
And I said, why are they doing that? Are they gonna put up solar panels or
again,
something?
they have not communicated with us. Like,
I mean, it was like a clear cut,
I know.
and
it's-
people who rent around there
Yeah.
were upset,
Yeah,
I know that.
yeah, they have not it's all site prep, but again, that was something that they did not communicate with the
Huh.
town, and we said, that cannot happen moving forward. We really need to make sure as you prep the site, we need to see your plans, we need to see your plans for traffic diversion, we need to, the town has to be intimately involved in that.
Huh.
And the community has to be made aware of what's going on, so again, as we approach, more firm planning on the East Avenue Road Diet project, the same thing. It's very important that we engage with the community and tell them what to expect, especially since we have so many businesses along Monroe Avenue. Yeah, and so the other thing that the Sustainability Oversight Committee kind of had a role in is securing our energy efficiency and conservation block grant. So this was not under the IRA, but the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Did a lot of environmental spending. So these were basically grants that were given to communities based on the demographic income levels and whatnot. And so Brighton secured about a $76,000 grant, and the Sustainability Oversight Committee recommended that, in concert with this redevelopment that was going on the roadway in Monroe Avenue, we also looked at zoning codes for Monroe Avenue. This is the main commercial thoroughfare, and I joke that our zoning codes are older than most millennials, so they're over 40 years old now, and it's time that we really had a revision of those codes and make sure that we are adhering to our values with regard to sustainability as we encourage development in the future. And what will that development look like? Most of these commercial structures are rezoned houses, and how do we make it so that we can maybe increase density by making this mixed use and putting people in the same places where they shop, things along those lines. How do we encourage that type of development? Because, again, we don't, it's the commercial interest that decides where to build, but we can incentivize certain types of building based on the zoning code, and that's what I think it's super important that we do that as we redevelop the roadway. Yeah. Yes.
I have a question, and I know this is an opinion about how many other environmental advocates do we have on the council, and are you if we didn't have you, what would happen?
Good question.
Well, I think it is definitely more of a priority for me than some of the other council members. I mean, certainly just in terms of, you know, my lived values, you know, I have solar panels on my residence, right? I drive an EV. You know, I'm personally invested in it. You know, I have kids, right? You know, I'm invested in a sustainable future, and you know, climate resilience I think is extremely important. It should be our number one concern. And you know, my colleagues have, you know, they're across the spectrum in terms of where they rank you know, climate resilience in terms of town policies, but for me, it is one of the main concerns, and I think that's why it's important as we redevelop for resilience and sustainability.
Mm-hmm. But you do have a couple of allies on, you know, people that pull with you.
Yeah. Usually, again, you can't get anything passed alone. You know, they might not lead the way, but at least, you know, if I push and I bring the community in, we can usually get them to do the right thing.
And how far from what you'd like to see are we? What you think is reasonable, and what you think the population really would value.
Well, again, I think a lot of, you know, it's not just the zoning on Monroe Avenue. Like, if you look at our climate action plan, what it calls for, and if you look at the CLCPA and our goals in terms of energy efficiency and carbon emissions reductions, like, we are not hitting those goals, and it's going to take a lot more. You know, and that was one of the reasons why I was advocating for the CCA, the Community Choice Aggregation Plan. So we did implement a Community Choice Aggregation Plan in our community. So that's basically when you pool your resources as a community in order to negotiate with RG&E for you can demand cleaner energy, and that's what we did. We had a renewable energy CCA, and so we had an administrator. We went out to market, and we bid for 100% renewable energy, electricity in our community.
Is it still going?
No, it is not still going. It went for 18 months out of a 2-year contract. And unfortunately, our supplier defaulted. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about is the fact that we've reached a settlement with the supplier, Source Power.
Just called Source Power?
Yes, yes. So so the way a CCA works is like you were automatically opted in. You had to opt out. You had to go through steps to opt out, but everybody was automatically opted in, all the households. So we had like 10,000 households that were in the CCA at its peak. And so everybody, you know, since we were only provided with 18 months out of a 24-month contract of energy at certain rates, we negotiated a phenomenal price because we were one of the first communities in upstate New York to have a CCA. We had 4.3 cents per kilowatt hours for electricity. Unheard of today. Unheard of. So we saved on the order of $1.6 million in the first 18 months, and we're on target to save another $1 million for the entire aggregated households over the next 6 months. So we did just settle with them for the entire amount that we would have saved. So everybody is going to get, everybody who is in the CCA will get a settlement check from.
How amazing. So what's next?
So now, so in addition to that, there were, so it's like $1 million to consumers who were in the CCA, and then $375,000 or so to the town to administer the CCA and whatnot. So we are, or administer the settlement. So we are hoping that with that settlement money, we are able to now enter into a new CCA.
Yeah. But if you have solar panels on your roof, you can't be in the CCA, isn't that correct?
Right,
Nor if you are receiving HEAP.
right.
Right.
And
So
that,
if you're, so if you're financially
Yeah.
troubled,
Yeah.
and therefore receive HEAP, you are not entitled to this program that would help you save money.
Right. And so that was, and so I really advocated for, in addition to the CCA, we have the community solar. And that HEAP clients are eligible for, so it was a way for them to save, like, this community solar was, I opted into it, but unlike the CCA portion, the community solar portion was not, you weren't automatically opted in, you have to sign up for it. So, and I will say that we had signups, the town actually received a fee for each sign up that was done, and we got $75,000 from Source Power to put towards sustainable energy projects within the town by dint of people signing up for our community solar. So again, I think it's incredibly important that we couple any CCA with the community solar.
And is it equivalent, or is one really better than the other?
We created it was a little consortium of towns, and some towns only opted for the community solar, community distributed energy, it was called. So it doesn't have to be solar, it has to, it could be whatever type of energy that you want. So some towns only, and so it was almost more popular to do the CDG than it was to do the CCA. We were the only town that did a CCA. The village of Lima also did a CCA, but when it came to the number of households that were enrolled in that, they didn't even want to sign on to, be part of the class action because they had so few residents. It just didn't make financial sense for them. For us, it made significant financial sense, and we were extremely fortunate that it got litigated so aptly by our town attorney, or the attorney to the town, I should say, and we were able to come up with a good result. So if you were enrolled in the CCA, which I think most anybody who was here was likely to be enrolled in the CCA, I think you should have already received your first letter raising the specter of the settlement, and it estimated the amount that you will be receiving in recompense. And but
When did that go out?
I'm not positive that they have gone out, so let me just double check. I think they were slated to go out, but I just want to make sure, because I would have probably missed the mailing because I'm so busy.
Do you have a job besides this?
I do.
Oh my gosh, what is that?
I'm a real estate broker.
Oh,
Yeah.
commercial, residential?
I do both. I do both, primarily residential though.
Okay.
So that was the CCA. I wanted to talk about the settlement, whatever. Sorry, just gonna go back through my notes. And again, this is great. Just keep questions coming. Robert, if you hear anything, you can just, oh yes, townwide curbside composting and refuse. So obviously, we have this wonderful business that does private composting, and we have a refuse district, a townwide refuse district with different neighborhoods, and we do extensions to the refuse districts. It was like a year ago that we decided to consolidate all of them, and as communities sign up for refuse districts, we just extend the overall refuse district for the town. So right now is basically the time frame when, if you want a refuse district to be considered for your neighborhood, you should be going out getting signatures. The town generally they don't want it to be something divisive in the neighborhood, so we look for 60 to 75%, like, acceptance rate, sign on for the district. And your district can be configured, whatever boundaries make sense, right? And of course, the benefit of the refuse district is that you only have one, vendor going through on one day, and so less traffic, less fuel,
road destruction.
Right, is less road destruction. So many benefits. So if you're not in a refuse district, I would.
Do you have materials that we can, because we would do it, we've done other kind of things.
Oh, yeah, it is on the town website, but, Chad Roscoe, Roscoe, he is the person to talk to. We're very close to the deadline.
Yeah,
So
what is the deadline for this year?
I'd have to go online, but we are coming up on it.
We have a block party on our street every year, and it seems like the deadline is always just after the block party. And this year it's in August.
Right.
I
So
thought we're gonna miss it again.
yeah, it's this time of year. This time of year. Because I
We'll have to
know
find out,
we just did the West Brighton Community Forum, and there is a neighborhood that is trying to get a refuse district there, and they were well along their way in terms of getting the number of signatures.
Why wouldn't there just be one refuse district, the town of Brighton? Of course, that's almost like saying, why don't we do it ourselves?
Technically, there is one, but it doesn't include the entire town. So we did, just from an accounting standpoint, we have one refuse district, but we do extensions. And part of the reason is because it is very local, generally, just like with community choice aggregation, you are guaranteed to save money because
Right.
you're buying in bulk. Basically, you're guaranteeing Waste Management is the vendor on it, so you're guaranteeing them a certain number of households, and
Right.
so they can offer you a break in price. So yeah, it's worth their time to go to your neighborhood, right? And so again, we save our residents on the order of over $1 million in terms of refuse collection fees by
Recycling.
waste
so
management.
They don't recycle. They give you
Yeah.
a pail. That's all you get, and it's every other week. And they change it. It used to be every week.
Even if you have waste management outside of the refuse district, they have changed their cycle for picking up recycling in particular. So they've converted people to 96-gallon totes, which is as big as your trash toter. It's got a yellow lid, so and they now pick up 96 gallons every other week, as opposed to basically, if you put out 3 or 4 blue bins before, they would pick up all of them. But they've changed the mechanism by which they pick up and transport the recycling. They have a articulating arm that's goes and picks up the bins, and so
If it's not in the bin, they don't pick it up?
Correct.
right. Now, if it's not in the bin, and this is, I think, an attempt to save costs on labor. They can, if somebody's just operating the arm, a driver can operate the arm, they don't need another person there to go
Right.
pick up the bin. So this, and again, I think one of the biggest issues with the change in policy was that it was not adequately like communicated to our residents. You know, Waste Management made all sorts of promises in terms of the notifications that they were gonna do, and you know, I started getting close to the time when they wanted to implement the new system. I was like, I haven't seen a single notification, and I'm in a refuse district, so what's going on? And then, like, before I knew it, like, you know, there was a note on top of a new bin in my yard, and that's how I, you know, and that's the only notification that I received. And so, you know, although I knew that they had changed their service level agreement with the town, for the refuse districts, you know, I was under the impression that we would get a lot more communication. And again, this is a bidding process, right? And we had two bidders. One was Waste Management, the other was Casella. And you know, Casella offered a smaller 64 gallon, which for some people is actually more manageable, but every other week, and that would be, you know, of course, or every week. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Every week, so that would be, you know, 128 gallons every other week.
Better.
So actually more. They were picking up more recycling, and kept us on an every week cadence, which works better for some. And so, but they were slightly more expensive, but still like within the realm. I mean, again, they're picking up more material, right? Because you know, I don't think it was adequately articulated by Waste Management that you know, those blue bins were going away like totally, like
The
you
what?
couldn't supplement
Blue
your
bins.
blue bins, your blue recycling bin. It was like, you know, if you put a blue bin out there now, they'll pick it up and take it away. So yeah, and that, like, that 96 gallon toter had to hold everything, or you can't put anything next to the tote
Right.
anymore. Yeah, so there were, and again, this all could have been communicated up front, but it was not. And so I think the surprise was what people are reacting to. You know,
Can you say more about the composting that you started talking about?
yeah, so composting. Right now we only offer, like, have a private option, you know, places like Impact Earth. You know, I know that there are 5 school districts, Robert, that anticipate doing composting within their districts, and they just put those out to bid. And
Right, so K through 12 in the Finger Lakes region,
Right.
we work mostly in Monroe and Ontario County.
Yeah.
There's about 17 school districts
Yeah.
that do that now.
yeah,
And then you have universities like RIT or
Yeah.
Geneseo that also have programs,
right,
and U of R, and those
Yeah.
are sort of the big ones.
yes,
But yes, the county did just provide some seed money, and 5 local school districts, K through 12, were awarded those. So that was Brighton, Pittsford, Penfield, West Irondequoit, and Fairport. So those were the 5 that got awarded money to sort of upgrade the system that they have, or start one if they don't have one.
yeah. So we have it on a limited basis for commercial/school entities, but generally we don't have it on a residential basis. One of the recommendations from the Sustainability Oversight Committee is that we, on the town level, pilot some curbside composting, because we know that it's gonna be the way to make it successful, way to make it part of your practice is to put it out on the curb with the rest of your waste. So and recycling. So so there, is an effort. I mean, I think we are urging, the Sustainability Oversight Committee is urging the town to start at least a pilot. I think that, again, we could potentially work with Chad Roscoe to organize your neighborhood into a composting district, and yeah, thank you for being here, Jim. And so I again, I just think it's part of the big picture. It's interesting to me because waste management, they have the capacity to do it. They do it at certain college campuses, and they and I lived in a state where, again, waste management was the predominant provider, and we had compost, we had recycling, and we had trash, and our trash bin was like a 32-gallon bin. Our recycling was huge, and our organic waste was huge, and so it influenced your mindset, right? You knew that you shouldn't be throwing too much in that trash bin. You knew you should be composting everything and recycling everything, but really that was driven by state policy for the most part. They do it in Massachusetts as well. At the state level, they mandate, consumers recycle to a certain extent and compost their waste to organic waste. So, again, I think, but waiting for the state to do it, and they did. They got that going downstate, right, Nick? In New York City, they got in composting, and they basically figured out that they could use all of the organic
the city is its own biggest customer.
Exactly. So they could use all of the compost that they generated, within their park system, within their. So it
made economic sense.
Yeah, made economic sense. So
when will that be? Everything be renegotiated again with waste management? Is it yearly or?
It's yearly. We have the option to renew. So yeah, but it is it's a 3-year contract that we have the option to renew it each year. So
the town does.
Yes. So I think we really talking to we're in deep discussions with them about how this transition occurred and all of the missteps, and as we, again, we're at the beginning of the year, but as we negotiate the renewal, it's really going to depend on how they respond, how responsive they are to our concerns. So
it feels like it's a little bit like that whole heap thing where something that is good for you turns out to not be available to you.
Right.
In this case, something that is good to you, recycling, and maybe saving money on your garbage collection, etc. Well, if you want to be kinder to the earth, you may not want to do it, and so you may not save the money that you should be able to save.
Right. Yeah. The fact that we don't have curbside composting available, I think a lot of people are very rueful about. I mean, and especially me, like moving here from a market that had it, it was just second nature, and to basically regress to a system where we have this, and it's frustrating too with waste management, is that they're saying, the minimum size toter that we can handle with this new articulating arm is the 64 gallon, and it has to be a proprietary, and we can't accommodate your own tote, when quite frankly in different markets, I assume they don't have a different vehicle for each market. In certain markets we know that articulating arm can accommodate a 32 gallon tote because that's what they have for your trash, right? And so I'm still confused, like, they never said, like, we're gonna have a vehicle that cannot pick up anything less than 64 or 96 gallons. That's not what they said. They basically said, hey, you know, we will pick up to 96 gallons worth of recycling, and not everybody generates that amount of recycling. They have different size households, whatever. Some people generate a lot more, and so you can call them and get another large recycling tote if you want. But again, the fact that we don't have composting, it's not really on the horizon for residential customers and for them. It's a big rub, and
Well, not
so
at the municipal level.
right.
So privately,
Right.
obviously, we offer that service.
Yeah.
So, and there are other private entities
Right,
in New
private
York State
ent- yeah.
that do that. But from a municipal level,
Right.
it's hard,
Yeah.
because the first thing that you need is processing.
Yeah.
There is no processing
Capacity.
going on
Yeah.
in Monroe County.
Right.
Even for us, we have to ship it either to Akron or out to Ontario County. So
Yeah,
everything that we
Victor,
collect does
yeah.
not get processed here in Monroe County.
Right.
That's the biggest impediment to
Mm.
expanding the programs
Right,
that we
right.
have.
And I don't know if people have been down to the processing center in Ontario County. It's fascinating. Really
How much
fascinating
land
tour.
is needed?
Oh,
Depends on how big the program
right,
is.
right.
So you're either gonna build a hub and spoke model
Mhm.
with, or you're gonna build one main facility and everyone's gonna, and that's not gonna get done by a private entity
Right.
unless you're Waste Management or Casella,
Right.
which has the money to do that.
Mhm.
They both, Casella is privately held, but Waste Management is a publicly traded company. They both have the ability to do it. What they're waiting for, in our opinion, is enough saturation in each
Yeah.
market. If we have about 5,000
Yeah.
residential customers, but if you had 50,000, now all of a sudden Waste Management gets interested because they
Right.
can, now they see the dollar signs, they can make it work at 50,000. Right? So that's part of the issue, is that we're just trying to sign people up and getting them
Yeah.
involved in composting so that those entities will take a look at it and say, you know what, we should invest in Monroe County. Because that's really what it comes down to,
Yeah.
is why is Waste Management, that's the conversation I would
Yeah.
have with them.
Mhm.
Why are you not investing in our community?
Right.
Like, we have people that want this, invest in our community,
Exactly.
right? Or you're not gonna get the contract,
Right.
right? That's the conversation that should be had, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Agreed.
what about companies like we have SAREC? Is that not in the picture because it's too small, or?
Well, it's an open bidding process, so.
Right.
Yeah, Casella just bought Sarah's, by the way.
Yeah.
Within the last 30
So
days.
you're gonna be Casella.
Casella.
Casella
There's a-
I
purchased-
changed from Casella to SAREC.
There's been a lot of consolidation in the
And
industry,
they bought
quite frankly.
Lilac. First we had
Yes,
Lilac,
Lilac,
and then
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot of consolidation, so, yeah, and so, again, so we would love to do a pilot to show, to demonstrate that it works and that it can be done, and also just to live our values.
What
Right.
would a pilot look like? A little bit more.
It would be a smaller market area, so in your neighborhood, just like, we go and do the refuse, we get the signatures for the refuse district, we would petition for a compost district, and
Because we've been asked to come back to color Brighton green
Yeah.
with a proposal for what we should do about composting. So this is what makes sense to me too. So we can get all those folks on board with
Right,
this idea.
exactly, yeah, and Color Brighton Green, I mean, that was the originator of the Sustainability Oversight Committee, right? It was concerned folks that were part of an organization that wanted something official on the municipal level, and that's how we ended up with the Sustainability Oversight Committee. And then, they still felt there was a need for that organization that was outside the government structure, which I do, because they push us, right? And some of the biggest advocates for the tree nursery, which is new, came from the Sustainability Oversight, or from the Color Brighton Green, rather. So, yeah, things along those lines. I think, you know, municipal processes tend to be very slow moving, and you need that push from the outside. And yeah, and that's why we're grateful for Impact Earth, quite frankly.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we should be looking at zero waste at all our municipal buildings. How does that look? How do we implement that process? What's the education look like? This is the incubator for those policies. So.
What do they do with the brush that they pick up? Because I know like some towns they have like mulch and dirt that we can just go and get.
We have that.
Oh, okay.
So 1941 Elmwood Avenue. We do have that because we do. You see all that yard waste we pick up. We do mulch it at the municipal level, and that is available for. Yeah, you can go take a garbage tote and get some mulch for yourself.
What are the hours on that?
It's business hours, like 9 to 5.
And it's not the same as compost.
No, it's not the same as compost. No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, this is yard waste. So, I'm getting really wonky and down in the weeds. Let me see. I think there was one more major topic that I said I would cover, and yeah, I kind of talked about this, like both state and federal grant funding, and what's the future of that? Unknown. It's very uncertain at this point with the current federal administration. I don't know how many sign-on letters I've had, you know, with regard to, but in particular though, on the state level, we just got done with the budget. There was going to be a restructuring of NYSERDA. It was probably going to be under the purview of the DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, as opposed to having it under, you know, its own entity, NYSERDA grant. So we'll have to see how that works. You know, we're hoping that the state will pick up the slack where it comes to, you know, grant funding opportunities, and because obviously this community has used that to very good effect. Now, currently under the DEC is the Climate Smart Community Program, and we are certified bronze level Climate Smart Community, and it's a little misleading because there is no gold. The silver is the highest, and we just got recertified as a bronze level community. And the recertification comes with a bunch of benchmarking and making sure that we're making our goals in terms of cutting our emissions. But yeah, again, and all of this is available on the website, and I have to say, you know, along the lines of, you know, communication or lack thereof, I wish we would enter the 21st century in terms of our communications with our community as well. You know, I have noticed that on the county level they have a splash page where you can enter your email address and then be kept abreast of all of the happenings in the county, subscribe to different newsletters and whatnot. And I think that's an important innovation for this town, you know, that we give people the opportunity to sign up for updates, that we at least issue a newsletter with a schedule of meetings, right? You know, we have, you know, Sustainability Oversight Committee is one of a dozen such community volunteer committees that we have. We have the Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Advisory Board, for which I'm also a liaison. We have the Planning Board, the Conservation Board. They were the progenitors of the tree nursery, along with Color Bright and Green. ARB, Architectural Review Board, we have all of these boards, they meet on a regular basis, the meetings are accessible, or available to the public, and like we should, the public should know when they're happening. It's like, what's happening this week? We have, basically, regardless of the week, we have some public meetings that are being held.
Is there a calendar that shows all that?
There is a calendar,
Oh, okay.
but again, I think it's different when it hits differently, like when you get it in your email,
Yeah.
as opposed to like you go, oh,
You have to
when
go
does
look
that-
for it.
Yeah, when does that committee meet? I have something. I think this falls under the Public Works Committee. Mantra. So
Yeah.
when do they meet? So. Again, just a little reminder, and again, it's an opt-in, if you don't want to hear from the town, you don't have to, but I do think there's enough interest,
And who has to do what in order to make that happen? Because it's an obvious thing.
yeah, I think it's an obvious thing too, and we've been talking about
Oh, okay.
it for longer than I care to,
Oh my God.
care to acknowledge. It's like, well, what staff is responsible for it? I'm like, well, find somebody. We have, administrative staff. We, it's got to be in somebody's job description to actually, and it's, again, I don't perceive it as that much of a heavy lift. Just to, again, if you're just saying these are the meetings that we're having this week, and so people can click through and look at the agendas and say, hey, what we're talking about, our refuse districts, that's of interest to me, or we're talking about the town hall renovation, that's of interest to me. I want to get an update. I think it's important that people.
Oh, I think it's great.
Yeah.
So, is there somebody in charge of the town's website and communications?
It's very diffuse right now. Like, so, yes, we don't have anybody really overseeing the website as a whole. From a security standpoint, we do. And of course, we're limited in terms of the number of vendors that we can use to publish a municipal website, just because we're held to a certain standard in terms of security. But the website vendor that we use is not very functional because it's very designed for municipalities, and security again is the main concern. We there, but basically, like I said, I hope our agendas and minutes are up to date with the SOC. Like, we have a staffer that kind of does the SOC, so they update that page, and similarly for the conservation board, we have a staffer that heads up, that serves that committee, and they're responsible for updating that page. And so I think there's a lack of centralized.
Yeah, it's communication.
Yeah,
That's
right.
That's a field of its own.
So,
Yes,
and,
field of its own.
so I kind of have an overall comment about that,
Mm.
all of that and everything else that
Yeah.
kind of is in here. And as far as the website, and I know we've talked about it, when the deadline for Star Credit for the senior citizens came out, and there was a deadline to apply.
Yeah.
You could not find it anywhere when that deadline was on. I searched and searched in order to find it, and therefore was able to meet the deadline, but I imagine I was not, others have not. But my thought is, and why it's so important that all of us who are sitting, do our work, is that this is really about the community speaking out.
Yes,
And so,
yes.
you asked, does Robin have, people, on the board who are supporting her in sustainability, et cetera, she may or she may not. But it's us. We are the ones who, if she isn't getting that support, we have to tell the people who are not giving it to her that they need to.
Yeah,
And
it's
that
the
this
same
is what we
pressure a lot
and
of
this
times.
is what we care about. And yes, that website really needs to be updated.
Yeah.
The other thing that we wanted to ask about was the property on Westfall Road.
Yes.
And the future of that, and
Yeah.
I guess we're wondering why there isn't some kind of visionary possibility for it, as opposed to, you know, we'll put in a couple more ball fields or something
Right,
like
right,
that.
and if you look at, so the town acquired, most of that acreage over the last 5-6 years, so, you know, we bought it in 2 sessions, and now it's like 77 acres out there. And we have had suggestions, you know, obviously the Winter Farmers Market is out there now, and there is some vision for it being a kind of community center. You know, we talk about the fact that our facility right now is leased. We did a recreation study like back in 2022 or 2023, you know, we have yet to really release that study and, you know, find out what the overall findings were. We know what our programmatic needs are, and we know that our programmatic needs are in terms of recreation and community meeting space are not being met with the current situation. So, you know, there's definitely a focus on that site. Obviously with the town hall renovation, which is going to go in 3 phases over the next 3 years, it's hard to undertake a project of that scope and also, you know, develop anything in terms of a site for recreation. But that's definitely on the radar. But what I'm looking at there is that we have more land than we would potentially use for recreation, or a community center. So is it possible that we could do some kind of community solar project there?
Or housing.
Like, what's that?
Housing. Affordable housing.
We you know, and if you look at our comprehensive plan, the Envision Brighton 2028 plan, which was written in 2018, so they're 10-year basis, we do need, you know, that is one of the areas identified for, you know, affordable housing development. And we do have one affordable housing development that is planned in the community. We are a pro-housing community, which, you know, that was an initiative started at the governor's level, where, you know, if you, she tried to stick first. She's like, you have to build more housing or else. And that was not successful. There was a lot of pushback by municipalities. And so now she incentivizes communities to create the circumstances where more housing will be developed. And part of that is rezoning, making sure that our zoning codes really are reflective of the fact that, you know, denser housing is welcome here. You know, right now we are zoned about 76% single family residents. You know, should that mix be more, right? We also have very Euclidean based zoning, so, you know, car forward, you know, that's why we have parking lots out front of all these buildings. Like, if you look at like the Village of Fitzers, it's a very different feel, right? Because all of the buildings are right up on the sidewalks. All the parking is in the back. So that's encourages a certain type of, you know, pedestrian and cyclist flow within the community. It feels a lot more accessible than, you know, going down up and down Monroe Avenue or Elmwood Avenue, right? So, you know, and it's all about, you know, less car forward development. And you have to create the circumstances for that by incentivizing through zoning.
Well, I brought that up because we have a long history of working on co-housing.
Yes.
And
which I know that, like, there was a co-housing project that was pitched to Public Works, gosh, 8 years ago, I think. 8 years ago.
What's
And,
co-housing?
what is co-housing?
Yeah.
Well, it kind of started in some ways with the eco-village movement, which was intentional communities.
Yeah.
But there are 2 architects, Chuck Durrett and his ex-wife, and I forget her name now, but they went to look at Denmark, I think, and came back with this concept that you don't need to have people figuring all this out for themselves. You can design co-housing communities from scratch,
Right.
and then bring people into them, and they will actually live and collaborate
Yeah.
a lot more than you would expect in just a normal subdivision.
Yeah.
And you design it so that it's
Opportunities
efficient
for community
and,
interactions,
yes,
like,
lots
public
of
spaces that encourage interaction, that encourage multi-generationality. So you
Right.
have different age groups interacting in these public forums that you intentionally build within the housing structure. It is a denser housing housing design, and so that's where co-housing was running afoul of our developments, because to make it unlike with commercial dense housing, right? You don't have a big investor. These are different, like the users of the housing actually investing in the development of the housing.
Right.
So it's harder. It's harder when you say, okay, you need this much parking and this much, to actually get it developed, because people don't
we
have
should
those
talk
deep
about it.
pockets. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still a great idea.
It's a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
idea. It's a great
And I
idea.
think
I was
it'd
very
be,
intrigued by it.
And the idea of having the housing dense, but then there's big open areas.
Right, exactly.
And, I can imagine a central area
Yeah.
that's an open area for the whole community,
Yeah.
not just the people living there.
Right.
But then there'd be spokes out to different neighborhoods where
Yeah.
they have dense housing
Mhm.
and a space to meet and make
Yeah.
the decisions about how to run
Right.
the operation, doing a lot of their own maintenance, but it's a small
Right.
enough group that you could actually know and establish that kind of lifelong relationship with.
Right.
And it's typically it's multi-generational is the best way to go.
Right.
So I can see a lot of, like that might be a perfect space because it hasn't been developed. It's
Yeah.
a perfect space to think that way.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I think it all depends on, the zoning that exists there. When we were
But you're
talking,
doing the zoning again, so it's an
Right.
opportunity.
yes,
And
exactly. And
so,
when we were talking about the Top Golf project, right? That
The what?
One of the Top Golf project, and
we weren't here.
yeah,
so-
what I was opposed to was rezoning that from basically dense residential to commercial. That that was the first step, and I was like, we have so few parcels remaining in our town that they can be developed for high density residential. To convert this parcel, it just didn't make any sense to me in the midst of a housing crisis, which our vacancy rates basically say that we're in a housing crisis, and right, and that's why our home values are escalating so quickly, right? It's a supply and demand issue in Brighton, at least. We just do not have as many units as the people who want to live here. And so that created another like debacle when
So was-
with
when there
the
was a vote, you voted against
reassessment.
it?
What's that? I voted against rezoning. I voted against rezoning the parcel because
Was that so there was a real tight, that was.
Well, again, I think we need to prioritize building more dense housing in our
Oh, yeah, yeah.
community.
I just
more
wondered
housing.
how hard that was to get rid of that Top Golf.
Well, now it's been like I was outvoted. I was outvoted.
It's
so
happening?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Where is it?
Over by the canal trail, like where Costco is, and that's where it's gonna be.
And that's where a lot of people did show up at town board meetings.
Yeah.
And said no.
Yeah.
But that's where communication comes
Yeah.
in, because you might have been there if
Yeah,
you had
well,
known. Or
We're
maybe you
new
weren't
in the
living here.
area, so.
Yeah.
Oh, you know,
Right, right.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
So-
would have been there.
Yeah, and so I think the more people that show up and say, and speak up,
Yeah.
the less likely we would now be polishing our golf clubs.
So,
Are they doing that project now? They announced a restructuring of the corporate entity like weeks after that vote.
I think it's at risk. I mean, technically it's still going to be built, but you know, now one of the big draws was that we were going to be the first in Western New York. Now with the restructuring, who knows if the Buffalo area one will beat this one, in which case is this one going to be like the regional draw that they promised it would be, right? If there's one in the Buffalo area, are people gonna come to the Rochester one? I don't know.
My grandson's 7th birthday is today. He lives in Boston, and guess where he's having his party? He's at a Top Golf right now.
I actually had the opportunity to go to my first Top Golf. Like it was in Maryland, and it was a sight to behold. I'm like, you know, I don't know if people
It's really
know what we signed up for. Those nets are like many stories high.
and the lights.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, it's going to be very visible. It's going to be visible from the
and
canal
it
trail.
seems like it's a kind of a class thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Right,
just
yeah,
like
yeah.
not the direction we want to go. as a society.
Supposedly this is golf for the masses. Like, you know, you don't have to have like, you know, deep knowledge of golf. You introduce drinking to it, and it's like, you know,
It's a party.
Yeah, it's a party.
And the average expenditure, not excluding my 7-year-old grandkid, is about
Yeah,
a couple $100
Yeah.
a pair of people who come
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
It's
Wow.
not a,
It's so-
Yeah.
it's
People-
not
for everybody.
People
Yeah.
said like it was, you know, they kind of touted the recreational aspects to it, which I was like, you know, because you could sign up for these packages. They were going to offer like,
Oh my
you know,
God.
you know, coupons and discounts and whatnot. But
And I'm a
like,
golfer, so I mean, I used to.
Right,
I know
yeah.
how to play golf.
Yeah.
But that is not golf.
No, it's not. It's not. It's like, you know, it's not a recreational outlet. So I thought it was interesting. Anyway, so yeah. You know, if anybody has additional questions, you know, I'm willing to stay for a while longer. But I want to thank everybody for coming out and being engaged, and I hope you will support Rob and Will for Brighton Town Board on June 24th.